Herald of the Emperor. Twilight eyed the new aliens as they formed a rough semicircle around her and Celestia. Their weapons were still lowered, but their faceless masks showed no signs that they regarded the humans' presence in any positive light. Celestia, resting her free hand on the hilt of her sword, did not seem to alleviate the tension, the two sides staring down at one another as if waiting for the other to make the first move. Twilight swallowed. She was no fighter. Why did she have to get stuck in the middle of standoffs, even with Celestia at her side? The whining sound grew louder as a trio of shapes descended from the sky. They were clad in larger, fully enclosed versions of the first group's armor, their weapons trained on Celestia as they approached. The one Twilight guessed was the leader hovered before Celestia before speaking. At least she assumed it was speech. The suit sounded like someone from Napan was trying to speak ancient Equestrian with a Germain accent, and doing a pretty poor job at it. Celestia's eyes narrowed before she responded with a more refined version of the same language that seemed to upset the leader. Twilight furrowed her brow. The exchange could have been interesting, had she known what the two were saying. "Princess," she whispered, giving Celestia's armor a small tap. "What are you saying? You didn't hear me?" Celestia asked, before the realization came over her. "How could I forget, you don't speak Gothic." Celestia mumbled something else under her breath, but Twilight was unable to catch what she said before Celestia laid her hand on Twilight's forehead. There was a pause before a shiver of energy ran through her body, a small bead of sweat breaking out on her brow. "That should hold you until you are able to learn the language," Celestia said as she withdrew her hand from Twilight's head. Twilight blinked several times, unsure of just what to say, before the Tao spoke again. "What did you do to your companion, human?" the alien asked, one arm of the suit aiming towards Celestia's face. "Nothing that you would understand," Celestia said, turning to face the Tao again. There was a pause before the Tao spoke again. "There is no need for you to be so uncooperative," the alien said. "Hand over your weapons, and I assure you that you will be taken care of." "As if your assurance by trust," Celestia countered. "I have faced many that have told me that they would ensure my security, only for them to turn on me when their plans called for it. However, I do not wish to battle you, Xenos, but merely wish for the means to leave this world and return to my work in the Imperium." "This is a secure location of the Tau Empire, human," the Tau leader replied. "We cannot allow you to just leave and alert more of your kind to our presence. But stay and turn over your weapons. We would be more than gracious enough to provide safe passage and lodging from which to continue your work on any sept world, whatever it may be." "You think I would be so willing to abandon my own kind for hollow promises?" Celestia's eyes narrowed. "You will have to do more to convince me of your sincerity." The Tau seemed to hesitate, some of the smaller ones hesitantly lowering their weapons slightly, but the effect would not last before the leader realigned his weapons towards Celestia. Twilight bit her lip. There had to be a way to resolve the solution without killing anyone. "Wait," Twilight said, drawing both Celestia and the Tau's attention. "If you don't let us go, we won't be able to save you." "Explain, human," the leader said. Twilight paused for a moment before speaking. "My teacher and I are trying to stop a major disaster from destroying the Imperium," she started, breaking away from Celestia for a moment. "If we don't, you will probably be next. But we can't stop it if we're stuck in some world like this, though I'm sure it'd be very nice and we'd be able to learn a lot." "Twilight," Celestia whispered, but Twilight was not ready to stop. "So if you let us go, we both benefit from this, we finish our work and save the galaxy, and you don't suffer whenever the disaster strikes." "Does," Twilight's confidence faded slightly. "Does that work?" There was another pause, the Tau looking between each other and conversing in their own language. Twilight watched them for a moment before she felt Celestia's hand rest on her shoulder. "I admire your quick thinking, Twilight," Celestia said. "But be careful, not everything in this universe can be so easily swayed by negotiations." Twilight had no time to answer before the Tau spoke again. "Your argument does hold some weight," the commander said. "And it does seem complementary to the greater good. However, there is still more that we must discuss before we can consider releasing you. You may retain your weapons, but you must come to our outpost under guard. Is that acceptable? Yes, it is. Celestia said, lowering her hand from her sword. She did not sound convinced, Twilight noted, but this was a different world than Equestria, and they had just survived being attacked by alien monsters. Celestia had every right to be cautious about new encounters. Very well, the leading Tao turned to another one in the group. Sha Sui, escort these humans back to base. We shall sweep the area for any further signs of Tyrannid presence. The leader of those Tao on foot nodded, the rest of the aliens lowering their weapons as the ones in the larger suits began to ascend into the treetops. The other Tao had reformed from surrounding the humans, and now beckoned Twilight and Celestia to follow them while two circled around behind them. At least the situation has been defused. Celestia mused as the entourage began to march through the forest. Thank you, Twilight, your diplomatic skills may have saved us all. Oh, you're welcome, Princess, Twilight replied, finding a place close to Celestia. Though the risk of being killed by aliens was no longer looming over her head, she still felt safest next to her mentor. The Tao did not say anything as they passed through the forest, though Twilight did catch several glances from the closer ones. Thank you for saving us, Twilight started. No reason to be too unfriendly, Celestia's distrust notwithstanding. The Tao conversed among one another for a moment before the leader spoke. These fighters are young, they do not understand your language, the alien replied. I, however, have relayed your thanks and can assure you that we are more than welcome to protect those that have understanding like that of the greater good. Sure. Twilight said, tugging at the hem of her shirt for a moment. What is the greater good that you keep talking about? At this, the Sha Sui's optics seemed to glow brighter. The greater good is what unites all beings, whether they know it or not, the Tao started, sounding less like a soldier and more like a reverent parishioner. With the guidances of the ethereals, each of us is called to perform certain tasks to provide for a brighter future for all peoples. We have been chosen to fight, so we fight, but there are those whom the ethereals call to build, or to guide our ships across the stars. And once called you can never step off that path until your death. Celestia interrupted. You are given no choice in the matter, even if your skills may lie elsewhere and need to be uncovered. You are not an individual, you are just another piece in a great machine that can just as easily be replaced. Twilight looked back to Celestia. She had never seen her mentor this hostile towards anything, really. Even Twilight's mistake with the want it, need it spell did not draw this much ire from the princess. I understand that you are our guest, the leading Tao started. But that does not give you right to question and mock the greater good. I do not believe in forcing one to follow any caste or path that is set before them, Celestia shot back. The body and the mind may be tricked, but the spirit knows where it is drawn and will discover the truth in time. Need I remind you how your own empire suffered a schism over these teachings? The Tao wavered, but was not slow in speaking again. That was a long time ago, the alien replied. Those that were confused on their places have been re-educated for some time. Did your ethereals tell you this? Of course, and why shouldn't they? The ethereals have never once deceived their fellows on any matter, great or small, it would be against the greater good. Celestia did not answer this, but her contempt was still marking her face. The Tao turned back to the path ahead while Twilight looked up to Celestia. Princess, she said. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong. Celestia replied, causing Twilight to frown. You don't seem like yourself, though, Twilight countered. Ever since we were found you've acted, well, aggressive. I know, Celestia replied, before letting out a sigh. And I'm sorry. The Tao were still waving sharpened sticks while I built the Imperium. I never had a chance to interact with them beyond psychic probes while I was on the throne. I have seen the worst of so many aliens in this universe that I guess my old hostility returned. She looked down at Twilight. I don't think anything will come of it, though. Once we've had a chance to rest, I'm sure I will be more personable. If you say so, Twilight replied, turning her eyes forward as they continued on. Still, her mind was drawn back to Celestia, even as the other woman walked on in silence. Twilight prided herself on attention to detail, and there was still something Celestia was not telling her. The problem was not the Tau, they were just like any other race Celestia had encountered over her long life. They could be spoken to, convinced, or killed if the need arose. Their concept of the greater good, while hopelessly childish and oppressive, was a lot closer to the ideal of harmony that she had spoken to her ponies. And of all the races that she could have arrived in the presence of, the Tau were far from the worst. It was not the Tau that had made her more irritable. It was herself. The Tau had provided quarters for her and Twilight. The building was roomy, the walls curving upward in clean arches to form a dome above them. Celestia did not exactly care for the pale white lining, but she was in no position to argue for better quarters. Twilight had not lasted long once she spotted a bed. Despite her assurance she was no longer tired, she had fallen asleep less than 3 minutes after the Tau had left them. She now lay in a tight ball, a sheet pulled up around her ears. Celestia, having changed from her armor to a white tunic the Tau had offered, sat in vigil over the younger woman, watching her in case something disturbed her sleep. Once she was certain that Twilight was sound asleep, Celestia had turned inward towards the source of her frustration. Why didn't we arrive in the Imperium? She thought. The Astronomicon is the most powerful psychic beacon in this universe, why wasn't I able to focus on it and get straight to Terra? Was this just another attempt by the Chaos Gods to get rid of me? Well, if it was, they did an admirable job. Celestia sighed. All the time I waste dealing with these aliens means less time to rally the Imperium. I need to get off this planet, and soon. She paused for a moment, just long enough to clear her mind before reaching out into the warp. One thing was certain as she begun her search, since her departure, the Imperium had shrunk. Dead worlds from Tyranid hive fleets littered the eastern fringe, a clean swath of empty space devoid of life that had grown from hundreds of planets to hundreds of subsectors. Orc enclaves that she had seen just before her departure had grown into full empires, smashing away anything remotely resembling civilized life. The Eye of Terror had receded, for what it was worth, but the shifting patterns of the warp revealed small patches of real space that had been swallowed whole by the void. Even the Tau had expanded, though it was not clear at first due to their minuscule impact on the Immaterium, but their holds to the galactic north had strengthened. The warp itself was not the chaotic storm she remembered from her time on the throne, but it was still much harsher than what she had watched over in Equestria. To her surprise, several patches that were normally impassable had died down, still dangerous to enter but no longer stymieing any who gazed upon it. What has changed in the warp? She mused. Perhaps the weakening of the Chaos Gods has caused the Immaterium a chance to calm. Setting the matter aside, she reached out further, searching for any small light beneath the darkness of the warp. She found it. They started small, but soon began to spread outward. Psychers, spread out across the Imperium. Some were locked in battle with aliens and monsters of all types, some were resting and recuperating, and still others did not even realize they possessed any powers of any kind. None of them noticed her as she drifted through the warp, instead focusing all their attention on the tasks before them. Celestia closed her hands and recalled her soul for a moment. The Psychers were the best chance she had at making her presence known, but merely speaking to one would do her no good. The Imperium was fighting, sure enough, but her borders were collapsing far more quickly than she would have thought possible. Perhaps this is what those scholars meant by the end times, she thought before reaffirming her soul. I need but one message to get through. Now, I must test my powers in this realm. As harsh as the Lord Inquisitor might have been, Mashes could not fault his efficiency. Marcos had quickly spirited Angelique off to one of the interrogation chambers aboard the Sanguinium Martyrs, so quickly that Mashes and the rest of his retinue had almost missed the two. Angelique sat in a small chair in the center of the room, her hands and legs restrained against the frame in case whatever caused her outburst decides to attack. Now then, Marcos said, strolling along the edge of the circle of light that surrounded Angelique. Your name and credentials have already been logged in inquisitorial records, so we shall begin with the interrogation. Angelique gave a small nod as Marcos continued. During your time under Inquisitor Mash's service, did you encounter any Xenos artifacts that contained any psychic essences? And no. Angelique started. The songs of those from afar have not been heard, though they are many. Are you certain? Marcos asked. Angelique normally stays away from Zeno's technology, Mashes added. If any were psychic resonators, perhaps she would have been drawn towards them. You make assumptions of the alien witch, Marcos countered. You should not be so easily swayed by what appears to be simple revulsion. Considering that I've been more involved in fighting aliens, I would think I know more about how they operate. Mashes shook his head as Marcos turned his attention back to Angelique. Describe your visions to me, he said. I saw, Angelique started before looking to Mashes. Does she want my approval? Mashes did nothing, which appeared to be what Angelique wanted. I saw a light, a great light, like the light that binds us all. A mare danced before her, and was joined by a bird. A raven, noble and wise. This raven, Marcos asked. Was it truly so noble looking once you looked at it longer? Yes. Angelique nodded. He stood in the light. Sometimes the most pure of images hides the darkest of depravities. Marcos' eyes narrowed. What else did you see? What was this mare? The mare bathed in the light, but she was not aware of the darkness. Angelique shuddered. The darkness, it rises, tearing at the light that surrounds us all. And who are we to stop it? It will spill the blood of the innocent, and the light will strike the world. There is a reasoning behind this line of thought. Mashes asked. Plenty. Marcos turned away from Angelique to focus on Mashes. The raven is often seen as an image of the ruinous powers, seen when schemers move about and plot. The light appears irrelevant, perhaps a calling of the spirit, but the darkness is truly indicative of the powers of chaos. What are you saying? Mashes asked, one eyebrow raised. That my psyker was attacked by a daemon of chaos. It is a probable answer. Marcos turned back to Angelique, the young psyker staring off into space. Her visions and symptoms are not all that different from numerous heretical and repentant witches that have passed under my watch. Why the daemon did not stick around to inflict more damage or perhaps turn the rest of the world to chaos is beyond me, but then the works of the ruinous powers often make no sense to the pure mind. Mashes frowned as Marcos paused for a moment. I will need more time and resources to make my investigations certain. Marcos said. Inquisitor Mashes, I ask that you release your psyker to my care for further interrogation. Will all due respect, my lord, Mashes started. I need Angelique for my own work against the alien. I can't just fly back to Terra and get a new psyker so easily. I can make arrangements, Marcos replied. There are numerous repentants that can be spared for your tasks. None as powerful as Angelique, no doubt. Mashes, it is for the betterment of the Imperium that I must take the psyker, Marcos frowned. Chaos has been retreating since the Emperor arose and saved Terra, but any loss of vigilance could lead to another incursion by the ruinous powers. We must do whatever is necessary to prepare ourselves. Now it was Mashes' turn to frown. Marcos made a good argument, and allowing a major chaos incursion to rise could spell doom for many in the Imperium. On the other hand, letting Marcos leave with Angelique would not only condemn her to a likely grisly fate at the hands of the Ordo Hereticus, but it would also weaken his effectiveness against the alien for some time, which in turn would put millions in danger should the Tau or worse make a move into the system. Angelique, however, made the decision moot. I see it, she said, cutting the tension between the two inquisitors. I see the light, rising from the element's bed. It is he. Who? Marcos asked. Has the daemon returned? Angelique did not answer. Instead she stood, her restraints snapping like dried sticks. Mashes and Marcos stepped back, as if trying to put space between themselves and the psyker. You have changed, but you are the same as well. What would you ask of me, my lord? Angelique asked, staring off into empty space. But they will not listen. They do not see. I've put up with this for too long, Marcos growled, grabbing Mashes' pistol before the younger inquisitor could react. I am silencing this witch before she can damn us all to suffering. Wait! Mashes cried, but it was too late. Marcos leveled the bolt pistol and fired, the shot ringing through the small room before the shell, harmlessly folded against a glowing field that had surrounded Angelique and dropped to the floor, steam rising from the crumpled metal. See? Angelique said. But they will listen to you, yes, when you speak to all. I will say what you say. With that Angelique spread her arms wide, her body seizing up as her eyes rolled to the back of her head. The daemon is taking hold. Marcos cried. Have the bridge vent this room of air, if we kill the host before the daemon can take hold, we can stop it from causing more damage. Mashes nodded. Dying from asphyxiation was certainly a better alternative to having his throat torn out by some daemon. Mashes to bridge, he called into his Vox unit. Vent all the air from interrogation chamber 4479 immediately. Negative, my lord, the voice on the other end replied. Our systems have gone haywire, and on top of that our astropaths have seized up. What? We've tried to get them away from the ship's systems, but something's holding them in. We can't do a thing to them. Mash's jaw tightened. His psyker seemed prepared to go on a rampage, his ship was locked down, and now the astropaths were acting up as well? What kind of daemon would have the power to take over an entire ship that easily? Then, Angelique spoke. Sons of the Imperium, she said, her voice echoing with power. Both Mashes and Marcos froze. Angelique appeared all right, showing no further signs of injury, but her eyes glowed, shining from within with the brilliance of a sun. This is no daemon I have heard of, Marcos whispered as Angelique continued. Too long have you drifted without purpose, without focus. Too long have the powers of the alien and the immaterium lashed at your borders, trying your strength and weakening your resolve. The darkness glows long, and the enemies of mankind draw closer with each day. No longer. Sons of the Imperium, a herald stands in the east, a herald that shall call forth the destruction of all that stands against us. No longer will you cower in fear, for your enemies will be scattered and fall like chaff. A light has risen that cannot be extinguished, and together we shall bring humanity back from the brink that it has fallen to. I am the light. Fear not, sons of the Imperium, for your emperor has returned. With that the light in Angelique's eyes fade. She collapsed in a heap, wrapping her arms around her knees once more. Without thinking, Mashes stepped forward, much to the vocal displeasure of Inquisitor Marcos. Angelique, he started. Angelique, can you hear me? I saw him, Angelique whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. I saw the light, and I saw him standing within. He asked that I would speak with the others, and I did. Angelique looked up at Mashes. He is waiting for us to come and bring him home. I can find the way to the element's bed, and you will find him with the mare. So will the others arrive, but the light must return to us first. And he has. The Emperor has returned.